Hello world, welcome to the Pocket Gamer podcast. I'm your host Brian Baglow, and joining me as always is our fortune teller and futurist Peggy Ansaltz. Hello Peggy, it's great to see you again. How are you?
I am good, Brian. I love how you come up with something every single episode, but this fits, futurist. I like that because we're going to look at the future of app store alternatives because everyone's talking about it, right? These are real business opportunities, more places, more players. It just makes sense. So we're going to zoom in on Nostra, which is a platform revolutionizing game publishing and development primarily in Southeast Asia and in India, but it's coming soon here. So we want to talk about that, and we want to talk about both sides because it's not just the platform, it's also about the player experience. It's always great to be on the cutting edge. No one has done a show like this. We're the first. Exciting?
I am always excited, but it's when we discussed this show and started looking at what's happening outside the sort of the Western markets, which most people see as being the cutting edge, I was thrilled and delighted when you told me the guest that we have today, because the one thing we know about the mobile market is it's always changing, always evolving, and looking at some of the markets out there where they're really experimenting and going in places that we're going to have to follow. So I'm really looking forward to this. I think we've got a fantastic show ahead of us.
So maybe we just sort of raise hands when I call you out so we know who you are there. We have Deepak Venkatramani. He is Vice President of Business Operations at Nostra. Nostra, under his leadership, has grown to become the top largest mobile gaming platform in India and Southeast Asia with over 90 million monthly active users, a catalog of over 500 games. And as I said, like all innovations from the East, we will soon see them in the West. Before diving into the world of gaming, Deepak also founded a skill gaming platform. So he has seen it from both sides. And Deepak, we're happy to see you here on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you for the kind words of introduction, Peggy and Brian, and I look forward to having a wonderful chat with you guys.
Maybe your first podcast. Could it be, Deepak?
Oh yeah, it is my first ever podcast.
A first topic and a first time guest.
Oh yeah, don't worry, you're in the hands of professionals, and we'll try and make it as fun as we possibly can. But absolutely delighted to have you here, so welcome on board.
Thank you.
And we have the founder and CEO of Felicity. We have Anurag Choudhary. He's based out of India. And really interesting, Brian, he has steered Felicity to become a true beacon for indie game developers in the region looking to design and publish captivating casual games. The company, 3 people, right? That is the success story. The company counts over 1 million monthly users and developed more than 10 super fun games that resonate globally, not just in India. He has a long track record across a number of verticals because he's been in commerce. He understands user engagement. He understands product market fit. And of course, Anurag, fantastic to have you as well to share your journey and tell us about the ever evolving gaming landscape. So I can't resist it, Brian, you know me. Pun intended. It's going to be a truly game-changing episode, Brian.
I love the fact that you can never resist a pun. It's one of the reasons that we get on so very, very well. So let's get to it, because I think there's going to be an awful lot in here for our listeners and for our audience that they haven't yet come across. And as we said, Nostra is currently the largest gaming platform in the whole region with ambitious global aspirations. So could you start by telling us about how Nostra, because it's the gaming platform on glance surfaces, I think I'm right. So how does it work?
You guys put in a couple of puns, so let me start off with one. This will change the game. All right. And
Perfect. A guest who opens with a pun, Peggy, I like him. He can definitely come back.
Glance, to start with, is revolutionizing mobile surfaces. By that, what I mean is Glance as a company takes control on the lock screen, and it tries to bring out appless content experiences, which is to say that there might be an app out there or there might be a website out there which has content on it, but Glance takes elements of that content and makes it available in a very smart way, powered by AI to a large extent on the lock screen, makes it available for consumption on the lock screen. And we do this for different content verticals. We do this for entertainment. We do this for movies. We do this for news, and we also do this for gaming. And that is where Nostra comes in. So Nostra's mandate in Glance's journey is to go deep into the gaming landscape. And the way we started our journey back in 2019 was to start with snackable gaming experiences, which at that time meant largely instant games. Our scope, our philosophy is to again take content, snackable forms of content from within games that people like, and make it available on the lock screen on a mobile device on which Glance is integrated and Nostra is integrated. When a user powers on his or her lock screen, they'll be able to see, they'll be able to consume a piece of content from within a game. So that, in a sense, is what we do on mobile devices, and hopefully you'll see in the future on a variety of other devices as well. But that's where we began our journey.
Amazing, Deepak, and it seems to make so much sense given the number of devices and the number of times that you look at your device through the day without necessarily opening it up. So a couple of quick follow-ups. First of all, is this a piece of third-party software? Do you have to install it? How does the user get a hold of it, and then select the verticals that they're interested in? And second of all, what's the revenue stream? Are the content creators, the developers and publishers paying to be there, or is this something that you're offering as a service to the network? Just give us a little bit of context, if you would.
So the way the access gets created in the first place is that the software comes bundled with the device. It's not a separate app that can be installed by the user. Once the software is first accessed, once the experience is first accessed on the lock screen, there's a very intuitive flow by which the user is able to select the categories of content that he or she is interested in. The second part is in given that we've been in India and Southeast Asia, the revenue monetization mechanism is through primarily ads, which is inside the content that can be consumed from the lock screen in very intuitive ways without it seeming disruptive to the core experience. And we also believe that, for example, that the lock screen itself is a very personal space for the user. They usually love to have elements of personalization on the lock screen. We try to have the experience as intuitive and personalized to the user as possible. And therefore, the ads also will not appear on the face, but very much deep into the content when the consumption happens.
That makes an awful lot of sense. So you're keeping the barriers to entry as low as possible and encouraging that initial engagement with the user.
Yep.
Looks also like it's working really well if you look at the numbers, because you have 82 million monthly active users, an average daily engagement of 20 minutes per user. So there's a difference here between the engagement rates with traditional app store downloads of games and what you're able to do with lock screens on millions of devices driving this engagement. Maybe you want to give us a perspective on that or compare that to understand just how does the ability to feature a game directly on the lock screen impact engagement?
What happens when a game is featured in the lock screen is that an entertainment avenue for the user is created, an entertainment avenue that's always on. We look at gaming, I believe, quite uniquely in the sense for the vast majority of the world. It's not about playing a game for 2 hours at a stretch. It's not about playing a game for 10 hours at a stretch. It's about playing a game for 10 minutes when I have the time in between doing something else, in between two other activities. I might be at work, and if I'm having a coffee break, I might play a game for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, right? So when you quote the 20-minute number, Peggy, it's not 20 minutes at a stretch, but it's 20 minutes, which is actually spread over 4 or 5 sessions in a day. To be honest, the numbers are just a way of keeping count. It gives us a lot of happiness, but it's nowhere close to the end result. And fun fact, we did recently cross 100 million in terms of monthly actives. So 82 is a little outdated.
Oh, yeah. And congratulations are in order. I mean, it proves here that there's also that element of discoverability there. So I think that also probably plays with this, because 100 million active monthly users is, yeah, it's significant. And probably also AI playing in there as well that we'll hear about in a little bit. But I didn't want to
Yeah.
only speak about that because we have you, Anurag, as well, and you are already on Nostra, and you've been there.
Yep.
We've talked about it. 3 people in your company since 2023,
Right.
so relatively young. First thing you do, you grow to captivate over 1 million monthly users. How has Nostra played in this journey? How pivotal a role has it been? Because again, that's a sizable number, and you certainly did speed it up.
Right. No, absolutely. So, firstly, I'll just want to set some context about how I got into gaming. I've spent a decade working across food delivery, e-commerce, in leadership roles. Even spent some time building a startup in content and failed. Casual gaming was one space which I felt very, was very apt to build in. Why? Because a couple of things. One is this space at large doesn't have any vanity metric. At the end of the day, you have to make money. It's a real business that one has to build from the outset. The second thing that I really love about casual gaming as a space is the acceptance to just failing fast. And Supercell found, Clash of Clans like after a year and a half into their journey. So Felicity embodied that from the get-go that, you know what, we will not be married to a game. We'll be married to building a business in gaming. And thus, when we started off, there were two things that were really important apart from building games. One was, where do we find our first set of users? Where do we not just monetize, but also find validation in terms of how good are we at the craft? And that is where I believe Nostra really helped us kickstart our journey. Our first game was launched on Nostra last year sometime, and from there on, we have gone on to publish more than 10 games with Nostra on their platform. From getting our games to thousands of users across multiple geographies, we do get a sense on which are the games which we want to double down on and further invest into, like spinning off as titles which we want to scale on mobile and other platforms.
I love that story, Brian.
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting. So, as Deepak was saying, it's a push service. It's taking games and putting them in front of players at the point where they're likely to want to have something. Was this your plan from the outset, to build a business in gaming, or is this something that you kind of emerged as you started?
We are all trying to orchestrate success. That was the plan from the get-go. In fact, I didn't commission one game. We commissioned 3 games from the get-go. Just that we sequentially, we happened to meet Deepak Nostra, got a chance to release one, and they liked our games. They are very adamant about quality. I remember how they play tested our games, and they're like, okay, this one seems to make the cut. But from there on, I think we got the opportunity to launch a few more, and that alternate validation channel also kind of opened up.
Just to add on to this, right? Code is content, and the developer is the creator, right? Now that's something that's very apt for gaming in the sense that we forget how much creativity is involved in making a game, and we tend to think as an industry that it's about optimizing the funnels, have the users learn the game, but it's not. It's a lot about creativity, and the way everything is set up, the way the entire gaming industry is set up, it just seems to us, and I think Anurag concurs, that the cost of creativity is extremely high. Building a game from scratch, applying creativity, and having it see the light of day and some amount of success, even a reasonable amount of success, is really tough. So, so I think that's one philosophy that both of us believe in, and I think, in my opinion, all gamers believe in. The cost of creativity should not be so high, and this is one possible way in which that can be overcome.
There's the opportunity to have very rapid feedback, testing, really moving that development process forward. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that rapid feedback, how that has impacted the development process, and maybe also, Deepak, chiming a little bit from your perspective, because you were also, cultivating that process, supporting that process.
Clearly, as you start putting them out on Nostra and the other alternatives, you'll see that some games have a spiky behavior in terms of their first user session. The first time the user experiences them, the users also tend to come back to that game perhaps the next day, which gives you good direction of retention, right? And those are the games, those are titles which perhaps are like in the top 20% of whatever we have built out there, are the ones that we like to double down on. So far we have churned out 14 titles, of which 3 titles kind of make the cut. The other great thing about Nostra is that at least you don't lose any money on those titles while they're out there, right? In fact, it helps you increase the span of monetization as well for each and every game that you put out there.
As I said, our approach was to ensure that any game out there is presented in a snackable format. It sees reach at least once. Everybody gets to experience it once, and then they can make a choice on whether they want to play it again and again or not, depending on how the core engagement of the game is. So the way we approached it was to say that you have a game code. So what are the tools that we need to provide as Nostra platform to ensure that first it gets onboarded onto the lock screen? Then it's about saying what other tools do we need to build to ensure that reach happens, to ensure that rediscovery of a game happens. For example, even elementary stuff that we think of in terms of Android, which is what are the re-engagement loops, are hard to build on a web platform. So that's a tool that we created to enable any game to use. We then created tools which ensured that monetization happens on the day the game goes live. So that's the way we look at it. So honestly, the difficulty of doing all of that is very understated in the gaming industry. But all that stuff is things that we try to take on board on our side and try to make available as tools to game developers who will essentially just have a code. And, their baby will be that code, and we are able to introduce all these features with wrap as a wrapper to the game so that it goes live on Nostra and Glance and gets out there for users to discover. There are more tools also that will come along in the future. For example, um, Japan, for example, our Japanese users have, even though a game might be really simple, they are very adamant and very insistent that the game needs to be in their dialect of Japanese. So difficult for a game developer in Turkey to be able to do that. For an outsider, it's hard to understand those dialects. But we live in the world of AI, in the era of AI. So we are now able to create this tool which takes the text from any game and translates it to multiple languages, ready to launch in any geography. So our entire approach is to say that game comes in and integrates it with one wrapper, which enables multiple options that a game developer can then use. So I mean that's how we try to reduce the barriers of entry to as small as possible.
And can we ask Deepak, what's the impact been on the developer ecosystem out there with the companies you're working with? Because this is solving problems not just for the players, for the developers. Are you seeing kind of a community growing around you in terms of the game's creators?
Numbers aside, MAU aside, the simple way I would look at it is, does a game developer of their own volition and choice choose to work with us repeatedly? Because very few people release only one title into the wild, right? It's multiple titles. And if there's genuine value in what we are providing to game developers, then they'll partner with us over multiple titles. We have developers in Turkey, in France, in India as well, some in Japan who look at us to release multiple titles without me having to go and ask them for more. So that's honestly the biggest validation that any platform could get. I mean, the other way to look at it is also longevity of the titles. Are we able to provide additional value over any other platform to a game developer, right? So far, I think the signs on both have been good.
Well, I think given how early in the process you are, and that those multiple engagements from the players, from the developers, and to have such an extensive network, as Peggy said at the top of the show, this could be the start of big things.
There's one thing I'm hearing over and over again across all of our shows. It's diversification, right? And alternatives, looking for more ways to get more mileage out of existing games. And that means bringing them to different platforms, to bring them into different contexts as well. And that's what you also have in mind, Anurag, because of course, small studios, they always have big ambitions. One is always to scale. How are you leveraging Nostra and also whatever else you're doing at Felicity?
So the overall strategy is to ultimately be cross-platform, as you said, drive the maximum mileage from each title in terms of users, and then of course, if your game's great enough, monetization. Right. Thanks to Nostra, we've also gotten introduced to a bunch of other, instant gaming networks where we also publish our games. And what I'm noticing is that this ecosystem is so nascent and fragmented. I mean, I think Nostra is this one platform which is recognizable in India, that many developers don't even know about it as yet. In the long run, I feel that if it's a casual game, one will build them not just for mobile but for platforms which are instant, like Nostra, Facebook gaming. There are, by the way, instant gaming networks which are PC first instead of mobile first, like Crazy Games. So that's another place. And lately, I'm also noticing a third interesting diversification that some studios are taking upon, which is Web3.
I'm gonna dig into that if I can, Anurag. So, I
Sure.
mean, this you've changed your development approach. This is clearly helping with your user acquisition, your engagement. Are there any sort of numbers that you can share with us in terms of your growth in user numbers, or anything that you can share with the listeners just to show how well this approach is doing for you?
We are less than a year old, but we have managed to get to a point where our games are experienced by more than 300,000 users daily across all the different platforms that we published on. Right, and across 14 different geographies. Just by having a diversified approach, we have managed to kind of make entries into geographies which would otherwise be very, very difficult to if we were to spend our own UA money. That is also helped us build our discipline around how do you like adapt a game for different countries, localization, build in-house capabilities for some sort of content live ops for games which are like worth doubling down on.
So it's interesting that developers such as Anurag, but others, they're looking for ways to diversify. They're looking for alternatives. Help me understand, help our audience understand, how does Nostra stand out in this?
We are trying to build to a system where um, anybody could publish a game from anywhere for any audience, right? And the way to do that, the as long as the game is there, the tools that enable one to do that, all that's our responsibility. A game developer does not need to think about what's the UA or the UA budget or the ROI going to be. They do not need to think about whether I need to create a legal entity in Japan to launch a game in Japan. They do not need to think about what should be my SEO, ASO, or marketing strategy to ensure that audiences find this game. Um, Given that we are present on these surfaces, and given that the tools are enabled to take a game live in any part of the world, wherever we are present, the task of bringing users to that game at least once, it's ours. It's ours. So that's the first differentiator. The second differentiator, we don't do this for money. So we do not say that you can reach these users and for that you have to pay us a fee. We believe this comes from the belief, and this also comes from my past experience as a game developer in skill gaming. Finding the right audience was literally the toughest part. That's one headache that we are very proud to take away. We are able to say that this entire business of reaching users in any part of the world, um, and um, and getting an early sense of how is that audience engaging with the game, and how do I re-engage the audience. All of that happens completely free of cost. Other big differentiators will come further down the line, where I go back right to the start of what we were saying, which is we are focused on bringing out snackable experiences, the ability to play a game without requiring a download on the lock screen. But over time, I think we'll also be able to release new experiences which are adjacent to the core gameplay, but which will enrich and deepen the gameplay in multiple ways, which I think is very intuitive and very necessary for gaming in the long term. What those experiences are is something that I'll probably not speak about right now. But Brian and Peggy, you guys did say that I'm welcome again further down the line with a new pun. So maybe that'd be a good subject to talk about then.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's I think we're all intrigued. It sounds like this service is going to go um, very well in a lot of new regions that you're not necessarily active in yet. So we would be delighted to have you back, Deepak. And if we're going to get the exclusive on all of the new features, then yes, we will roll out the red carpet, my friend.
Thank you. As soon as I have the lineup, I'll be ready.
We said we want to have you back, and for good reason, because you're going global.
As I mentioned, the way we integrate on a mobile device, the way we are available on a mobile device is if it is bundled through an OEM or a telco. So the Nostra presence is not dependent on a country by country rollout. It's more a function of what kind of experiences are um, really key and really beautiful to launch in a Western market, and that's something that we actively work on. So that's the way Glance and Nostra both enter any new market. The beauty about that is that therefore the scale up is not gradual. Um, Brian, I don't know where you're at. You sound like a Scotsman, so I'll assume that you are in
Yes, correct. I
Glasgow,
am right outside Edinburgh.
Edinburgh.
Oh, very close outside Edinburgh. It's only 40 miles away, so
Right,
literally nothing as the
right.
crow flies.
So it actually might happen that one night you don't have Glance, on the next morning you do, right? So it gets when it gets bundled with a telco or an OEM, then it gets rolled out super fast, right? It's not a gradual scale up.
I'm with you.
So that way we'll enter, that way markets will get lit up. But really the key to understanding, how we'll make a difference in any particular market is to acknowledge that the games we have in India, the games that are available to consumers in India are not going to be the ones that will work in Scotland, right? Simple example, Scotland is a huge fan of football. Most Indians are not aware of football, right? So, so the huge difference. But cricket might work in both places to an extent, not so much in Scotland, but a lot more in India. So, I mean, this is a very surface level analogy, but as you go into so many genres that exist in games, we have to acknowledge that content that works in a given place will not work in another place. So all of these complications come in, and one game developer, one game will not be able to solve all of that for all the countries in the world. But our philosophy, our ambition, our vision is to ensure that that option should exist. Any game should be able to go to any place in the world. We do live in the era of AI, but what that means for us is that a lot of things that were not possible earlier, for example, simple language translations with high accuracy, um, are now suddenly possible. AI personalization and the localization that drives is a huge part of it. Again, our approach is not to acquire games country by country, but to create a system by which anybody in the game development ecosystem in the world can create games. And once you have that catalog, then the option is for the game developer to take the game to whichever country that he or she wants, and then let our personalization algorithms take over, our personalization models take over to figure out if that game will work in that country or not. So sourcing globally and then making it available locally in AI powered ways, which handles the presentation part. That's the way we approach it.
Do you have future plans of expansion, but you also want to further support game developers, people like Anurag and his studios? You're in the middle of an ecosystem. There's a lot of, I wouldn't say mouths to feed, but there's a lot to balance there. How are you doing that? And how do you see Nostra evolving going forward?
I don't see it as a balance, to be honest. Okay. If we are true to our philosophy, and if we stick to these basic principles that I outlined, then this is something that can expand the mobile gaming market. It's not a fixed pie anymore. I think there are some common statistics which we keep hearing about. Retention is tough, right? We know that if 1 million users are acquired for a game, maybe some percentage, depending on the game, even start playing the game, and a single digit percentage out of that is retained after 30 days. This can be one of those things which solves that problem. So that's the way we look at it. It creates additional gaming occasions from consumers. which goes back to the first point I said. I'm not looking to take away 22 hours, which is spent on some other game, to be spent on Nostra, but I'm looking for that 10 minutes when you're having your tea, right? That time you're not playing any other game, and therefore, it's not really a question of balance. It's a question of expanding the pie in a way that everybody benefits, and all our successes therefore are linked by how effectively we are able to expand the pie.
Great model. Great model, Brian.
Just having it there, so whenever you look at your phone, you glance at the screen and it's like, oh, a new game, something interesting. It's that dopamine hit that we know gamers love. Anurag, I'm gonna come to you and ask the same question that Peggy just asked Deepak. In terms of the trends, the changes that you see coming up, where is it that you guys are looking ahead to? What is it that you think is going to come where developers like yourself are going to have to change using platforms like Nostra?
So having that diversified mindset from the first get-go is, I think, one thing that a lot of developers will start thinking through. That, what, will I be able to port this game across multiple platforms seamlessly? It would be in the choice of the game engine that they make, the choice of assets that they create, the grade of assets that they create, everything else, right? That is one. The second thing, interesting thing that I'm noticing is that, given where the industry is going, there's a lot of diversification that's happening to games which are what we now understand as hybrid casual, right? So where
Yeah.
there's an opportunity to also monetize the user through in-app purchases. And what we're seeing is that even the alternative platforms, some of them have started encouraging that. The third is the shelf life of the game itself. Previously, you could build titles which would perhaps last you, if not a decade, at least 5 years, you could continue earning from it. But the pace, the rate at which things are changing, if I have a winning game, how do I leverage that to build many more games, right? Like, rather than just obsessing about that one, because even for us, I mean, while we have a funnel which is narrowing down to successful titles, there are two things that we can do from here on. Either we can add more titles to the fray, or think of taking this game mechanic which works and making multiple renditions of it. For example, if one of the games that's working well for us is a hidden objects game, wherein it's a finding Waldo or a where is Wally kind of a game, right? So now that lends very well to even an IP collab tomorrow. If you're finding objects in Hogwarts, Harry Potter, so one also needs to think about the reusability of the game mechanic to kind of spawn more monetization and different experiences. So these are the three broad things that I think a game developer needs to kind of think of to to kind of thrive and survive in this ever-changing market.
That's great advice. And I think all too often there are developers out there who every single title is kind of starting from scratch, and they're not kind of building on their previous success or learning from previous mistakes even. So that's fantastic.
What advice would you give to a small studio considering Nostra as a distribution and feedback platform?
I would just say be game. Another pun.
Another pun. We can't beat that one.
We love you. Uh-huh.
I think we stay with that one. I'm good. Be game for anything is what we're saying here,
Yeah.
Brian, and see the opportunities. That's what this is about. And it will be, you have ambitions to go global, but right now it exists and it's had such impressive traction in Southeast Asia and India. It's also telling our audience that if you want to launch in those countries, well, they can do that through Nostra.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't require hoops to jump through. It doesn't require multiple methods or mechanisms of investment before you get your first user. I think it's a great way to get your game into any market, not just India, but wherever we are present, even if you've developed a game in any other market.
Given some of the conversations we've had with guests over the last couple of years, Peggy, where everyone's been decrying the competition on the marketplace, the saturation, it's the fact that so many storefronts are so hard to get in front of players, and that UA is by far one of the biggest challenges that so many developers are facing. Having the opportunity, having the invitation to go and reach markets that you may not have considered before. Sounds like something that every sensible studio and every listener should be doing. Gentlemen, can't thank you enough for your time. It's been completely fascinating. It's been eye-opening. And I'm sure we're going to be hearing an awful lot more from both of your companies. Now, before we let you go, we have two questions that every guest to the show gets asked. The first is, what is it that you're playing right now? In those little 10 minutes where you're having your tea or, and then the tough one at the end is favourite game of all time. So, Anurag, can we perhaps hear from you first?
Yeah, so I'll start with my favorite game of all time. It's Subway Surfer, and I have a high score of 5 million. So you'll have to play. I think I was on the India leaderboard, like third something for a week. You'll have to play that for I think at least 3.5 to 4 hours continuous to get there. So yeah, and I love the way they like make the game fresh with a new map every few weeks. The game that I'm playing right now, actually, I mean, you may say that it's a cheap, plugin, but I mean, I'm playing our game Seek and Find. It's a hidden objects game. You can kind of, come and find objects from like the pyramids of Giza to a beach, sunny beach. So we have multiple maps, a lot of art. What I like about the game is there is you don't have to premeditate anything. Just sit and relax, and you can go about finding objects in whichever way you want, right?
Hidden object games, I think, are much underrated here in the West. They're somehow seen as being simplistic or not real games, but they have been huge across the world when you look beyond the Xbox and PlayStation crew. So I'm with you. It's a nice, relaxing hide and seek. Nothing wrong with that at all. So thank you, Anurag. Deepak, you've had a few minutes to think. So what are we going to hear?
What I'm playing right now is Dr. Wolf Chess. Absolutely mad about that game for the last couple of weeks now. Um, I mean, whichever 10-minute window I get, I'm usually on that, and it drives my wife mad as well. Um, so that's the game I'm playing now. Um, the favorite game would be a mind game. That's another pun. And
Okay, you're not supposed to take over the host's, love of puns, but no, I'm teasing. Please continue.
I think the all-time favorite game would be Football Manager. So I'm a data junkie at heart, and I love football, following and playing for the longest time in my life. So Football Manager, I think I would have bought every purchase off of Steam for the last 10 years or so.
Listen, we hear that from so many people that we speak to, and yeah, for a country that isn't necessarily big on football, it is a solid choice. So thank you very much, gentlemen. It has been an absolute joy and an honour to find out more about what you're both doing.
I will second that. It has been a great glimpse also into some other models, alternatives. And I love to end on a very positive, which says that, there's a lot out there to discover and to do. And that's what you're saying. You're doing literally, game on. May I say it, gentlemen?
Game on. Nice one. Good one.
This show is all about how to do your job better, how to make an amazing game, how to market it, and you have a say. So if you have a story or know someone we need to shine a light on, then we would love to hear from you.
We want to hear from you. We want to reflect the reality of the mobile games market in all its wonderful complexity and strangeness. So if you have any suggestions for us, if you have any feedback for us, you can always get in touch. You can email us at podcast@pocketgamer.biz. You can find us on Twitter @PGBiz, and you can reach out to us through the pocketgamer.biz website. If you're interested in listening to all of our podcasts, you can find them at pocketgamer.biz/podcast, and we would love to hear your thoughts on future shows.
And we've got you covered on all the major platforms, so subscribe to the audio podcast, as Brian said. Look for us on YouTube. If you want to read it, hey, you can do that too, because we have a companion post for you as well on the pocketgamer.biz website.
Tune in again for the next edition of the pocketgamer.biz podcast, and we look forward to speaking to you in the near future. Until then, I'm Brian Baglow.
I'm Peggy Ann Saltz, and that's a wrap until next week.